personally had that kind of picture in my head about Islam, of course, until I watched the videos about the killing the apostates, killing adulterers. Like I had no knowledge of any of these things, and the first time I heard it, I was like, "Is this my religion? Like, how does this work?" And I just want to
So
be enlightened
what
about this.
exact video did you see about killing apostates? I mean, how long? If you look at, for let's take a look at the Ottoman Empire. Yeah,
Hmm. Yes.
the Ottoman Empire has some of the best, well-kept
Records, yeah.
records. It's called the Sigil. Yeah.
Hmm.
If you did a search on which we did actually, I did it when I was doing one of my small little books, which was a dissertation.
On Ridda, yeah.
On Ridda.
Yeah.
And if you look at, for example, from the time of Bayezid II, whenever the Sigil was operationalized, up until the time when it finished, if you put on in keywords, because now they've digitized it, if you put in keywords in the original language, which is the Ottoman Turkish, yeah, to find out how many cases there were, how many do you reckon you'll find?
A few, maybe less than 10.
Well,
I guess.
yeah, and a lot of them were like, I actually translate some of them, putting them in the book. The thing is, when you look at them, a lot of them were being pardoned. The Hanafis were saying it's maslaha, these kinds of things. At the same time, I make this point actually in the book that in the 1800s, which is the 19th century, where in America they also had the Civil War, the American Civil War between 1861 and 1865, you'll find that there are cases in America, and this is after Abraham Lincoln, after liberal reforms, the founding fathers, everything, right? You'll find that there are cases in America where there's treason that's being dealt, okay, on issues which are non-military, so they're symbolic only. So I mentioned in the book the case of someone called William Mumford. And so what William Mumford did is that he went and he burnt a flag, okay, and he got killed for it, basically. He was hanged in front of everybody. And that was seen for a lot of people as consistent with liberal principles, consistent with contractarianism, consistent with laws of treason, consistent with constitutional law in America. Now, in the same time, I show that even though there was another civil war as well in the Ottoman Empire with the Greeks, funny enough, at the same time, a lot of Greek people were becoming Muslim and then converting out of Islam in order to tease, if you like, the Ottoman rule. So one of the cases, I forget the name of the person, the Greek person that was I mentioned, one of the people that was at the same, very, very same time, was taken in for the same reason, treason and so on, was pardoned in the court. And I show you that this is, in fact, the only thing you'll find, the only record that's available in the same time period. So when you look at history properly, you'll realize that both liberal contractarianism and Islamic jurisprudence allow for certain treacherous or treasonous laws to be implemented or waived. And sometimes you'll find in history situations where they're being implemented, and sometimes you'll find situations where they're being waived. Now, for me, I don't see this as an issue of Islam, because if it was, then in implementation, surely our records should be filled with, like you say, you incorrectly, sorry to say, you incorrectly indicate that the history is fraught with people being killed for this thing. But what we find is that there's like-for-like comparison when it comes to issues to do with treason between Islamic systems that are run by Islamic jurisprudence and liberal systems. America is based on liberalism. It's based on it. It's a constitutional law, the Declaration of Independence, all these documents, separation of powers. You can't get more secular than that. And so when you look at the like-for-like comparisons, your historical analysis is absolutely flawed. When you look at, is this my religion? This is exactly what the white man wants you to think. You have been forced into that thought process. The truth, when you look objectively into history, is much more nuanced than that, much more comparable than that. The truth of the matter is, when you have systems which are contractarian in nature, by the way, Islam and liberalism are contractarian in nature in different types of way. You will get tensions between so-called individual human rights and state rights, and sometimes that can be manifest in the death or capital punishment for things like treason. And you might say, well, I don't agree that that is treason, but that's aside my point or your point, because in fact the Hanafis, like As-Sarakhsi in his Kitab al-Mabsut, he actually mentions it's like treason. He mentions that it's a classical book that was written before liberalism even took off. and the Ottoman Empire were Hanafi jurists. So the truth is, it's much more nuanced than you make it out. It's not, my religion's not like this and that.
Yeah,
it's not like.
and you know what? I want to make a point as well. Like, you may have seen this from like ex-Muslims or people who don't understand Islam, or what they do, they're reductionists. So they're apologetic reductionists, where they reduce Islam to a few things that they don't like. Now, we have to be very just and fair. When you look at Islam, you have to look at all of the data and make a judgment. You can't zoom in on something that goes against your liberal sensibilities. This is a very immature way of dealing with any worldview.
Yeah.
Like, imagine a scientist did that. He picked the anomalous results and said, my theory works.
Yeah.
But he ignored all the other data that went against his theory. What kind of stupid, insane, intellectually molested, what kind of silly person would even make a judgment based on that? And that's why, for example, you have these far right people sometimes, or even the far left, or the ex-Muslims. Honestly, let's have a friendly conversation. Let's look at all the data. Fine, you mentioned a few penal codes. Why don't you mention the prophetic tradition of the Prophet ﷺ that said, love for humanity what you love for yourself? Narrated by Bukhari, in Tariq al-Kabir, it's a sahih, it's authentic tradition. Why don't you mention the ayat in the Quran that talks about, what is the steep path, is to free a slave, to be compassionate, to feed someone poor or a relative. Why don't you talk about all the other data? When you don't talk about this, it shows that you just have, you have an axe to grind. You have an issue. You already, it's what in the philosophy of science called theory ladenness, meaning you already agree with your theory and you force it onto the data. This is not an intellectual way of dealing, a nuanced and even compassionate way of dealing with the tradition. That's why when people do this, that's why some ex-Muslims should not be taken seriously. All they talk about is this negative. Yani, when you talk about a worldview, speak about the worldview as it is, not as you want it to be or how you've reduced it. And for example, the Sijil records, you may find very few cases of these apostasy laws. Why don't we go to the Sijil records on minority rights? Why don't we go to the Sijil records of, the coexistence? There was a Jewish historian called Amnon Cohen. He wrote a book, A World Within. It's a 2-volume book. We have it here in the office, I believe. And he collects the Sijil records, I think over 1,000 records or something, concerning the Jews. The Jews had the freedom to go to the rabbinical courts. But according to him, and you could check it out for yourself and correct me if I'm wrong, the majority went to the Qadi. The majority went to the Islamic judge because they knew justice lived there. And if you read the details, Jewish women were going to the Qadi complaining about nafaqah.
Wallah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, complaining about maintenance of the woman. Also,
It's a guy called
Amnon Cohen. Habibi, you're Turkish, right?
Yeah, I never thought
I could tell 100%. Abicim. Dilne abicim. Tamam, dilne abicim. Abicim, let me tell you something, yeah? Let me give you some advice as a fellow Turk. I'm like a good Turk.
Yeah.
I'm like an Ottoman.
He's a fake Turk. He's a fraud.
Let me give you some advice, Habibi.
Yeah.
He's the enemy.
Be proud of your history.
Of course, yeah.
Be proud of your tradition.
Yeah.
Be proud. Like, I've been in Turkey for a long time, yeah? And I've stayed there for a long period of time as a resident. And let me tell you something about Turkey. Forget the politics, forget the economy for a moment. Let's just talk about the people. Let's talk about the people and let's talk about its history. There's a lot of secular, extreme liberals in Turkey that are saying, oh, we must be like France, we must be like Britain.
Yep.
What are they talking about? What are these people talking about? These people are insane. I've been to Turkey. You have the best hospitals in the world. You have friendly people. You have compassionate people. You have roads that you could actually drive on, big roads. Now, yes, there's problems everywhere. In my country, in the UK, and I love this country. I'm a pure Brit. I love this country. I was brought up in Hackney, yeah? Let me tell you something. If you have an emergency hospital, you have to wait 4 to 8 hours. 4 to 8 hours, yeah? When I came, there was no petrol. There was no petrol. There was no.
Can I say something about?
Habibi, what I'm just saying, I don't want to make a political point. I'm just trying to get people to realize what is it exactly that you want to emulate. Infrastructure. Turkey has a lot of infrastructure now. The roads since 2004 have been built, and I've driven in Turkey than maybe most Turks have driven in Turkey. Yeah, and you have very nice roads.
Right.
What do you want to emulate? The food? You don't want to emulate the food. Turkish food is one of the best food in the world. What do you want to emulate? Tell me what you want to actually copy. You want to copy values? You want basically to have 16 genders being taught at university that they're well. So what is it exactly that you want to emulate?
The thing is, right now the
You see
Turkish,
my point? If it's only an economic problem, then fine. It's an economic issue.
it's
But
an
don't make
individual issue.
yeah, but Habibi, don't make it into some of these brothers shouldn't make it into this massive kind of ideological. We must emulate everything. You have great minds in Turkey, whoever they are, whether they're
Right
secular.
now, they're all
Abi,
going out.
Abi, whether they're secular or not is irrelevant. Whoever they are, there's good people in Turkey. There's a lot of khair. There's a lot of positivity. And the problems that Turkey is facing, every nation in Europe is facing these problems. Poverty, meaninglessness amongst the youth,
What is this? Sorry.
nihilism.
What is this?
It's Baba Ganoush.
Right now, all of
Do you
the
see my
Muslims-
point, Abi? Do you see my point?
Look, let me tell you something about Turkey. Right now, because of the government itself, so many young people are becoming atheists because the government right now sucks, to be very
Yes.
honest.
Okay.
Right
I
now.
don't know about that. I'm not too sure about that. I don't know the ins and outs of the politics, but we can't blame the government for someone becoming atheist. Let's just be very honest here.
I mean,
Uh,
because no. The reason
How
why
is
is
the
because
how does any government force someone to become an atheist? I don't
They're
see
not
the
forcing.
there.
the link between us, the government portrays itself as something that is Islamic, that is radical, and people make the irrational decision of saying that, oh, okay, this Islamic government is bad, so Islam is bad. Of course, they make the irrational decision, but essentially, the government has a how to say, like has a factor. It's like affecting
Okay,
people's
okay.
faith.
This is a new point. Now I don't know the details too much, okay? And I try not to talk about other people's politics to that degree because I don't know the details. But let me give you some advice. And what I've noticed in Turkey is this. In Islamically, we should control what we can control. And what we can control is our own actions and we
We don't want
could
to talk about people's politics. Well, you
bust.
wait, statement.
Wait, Habibi, we can control our own actions. Now, I think what is lacking is a youth movement of people talking and conveying Islam in a way that people that people's hearts will come closer to Islam. I think there is somewhat of a lack of communication. I remember I gave a talk many years ago and I gave advice, and I saw this from an outsider, so I might not be totally accurate, but I realized there was this tension between secular people and more Muslim practicing people. Obviously, they're all Muslim, inshallah. But the thing is, there was this tension, and I realized this tension is not necessary. We shouldn't create ideological boundaries between people in Turkey. We should create this brotherhood and sisterhood in Turkey. Everyone is on their own journey, yeah? Because it's never black and white. I've met people who may be a bit secular, but they pray 5 times a day. I've met people who may seem very practicing, but they may not have good adab and akhlaq. Everyone is on their own journey. What we need to realize, we need to create a little bit of an intellectual and social movement to bring people's hearts closer to Islam with our good character, with our rahmah, and also to show intellectual arguments that Islam, is not backward. It has a vision for itself. It's based on truth. We have good philosophical arguments. It's a beautiful spiritual tradition as well that's based on truth to connect with Allah. And these are the things that we need to revive. Sometimes blaming the authorities and stuff like this, we don't have control over that per se. What we can control is the here and now and what we can do. And I really believe that there is a lot of khair in Turkey. I've met so many different people from different perspectives in Turkey. And, it's a beautiful country with a beautiful people. And just like everywhere in the world, even my country in the UK, beautiful people in this country. People think, there's lots of racism here.
Sure.
There might be, but there is beautiful people in this country. And we just have to basically, on a human level, have these conversations and elevate each other's understanding. And once we start doing that slowly, I think it's going to be positive, Abi. I think it's going to be positive.
Let me raise awareness about one issue, though. Right now, what's happening in Turkey is not usual. It's definitely not usual.
But I think, sorry to stop you, but I'll be honest with you, brother. Yeah, we're not really interested too much in Turkish politics.
Of course, sorry, I don't know.
I mean, I have to be honest, innit? Like, we're not specialists in this.
Of course,
maybe he's more specialist than me, but I barely know.
Yeah, he has a point, Abi. I think the general advice would be is we all have a duty as Muslims and as ethical human beings, whatever country we live in, to be beacons of light for that community. Because sometimes, Abi, we have to take moral leadership, intellectual leadership. Wherever we live, wherever we go, we should be positive. We should have rahmah. We should show akhlaq and adab. And the rest, leave it to Allah. We should just, every drop raises the ocean. We should do our best. And whether we have certain political, ideological perspectives on certain things, you know, these debates are going to continue, whether today, in 10 years or 20 years. They've always continued these debates. If you look at the history of politics, they're never going to stop. I think what we should also focus on is what we can do, what's within our power. And I think the reason I focused on Turkey, because I'm connected to the country, because, you know, I've connected with the place, you know, even as a resident. And it's a wonderful place, wonderful people. There's lots of khair. And yes, there's always going to be challenges, but life is a test, Habibi. And, you know, we should never rely on anyone else to try and, you know, affect our spirituality. We should do our own learning about Islam. Islam is true. I have a book in Turkish. It's published by Ekin Publishers. It's called Hakikatun Izinde. Yeah.
Hakikaten izinde.
Yeah. Give it a read. The third print is already out, I believe. And it talks about spirituality, why Allah is worthy of worship, why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final prophet. It talks about the proof of Quran, the proof of Allah's existence, His oneness. Beautiful things. Even goes a little bit about the history that I spoke about, the convivencia, the coexistence. So get that book, Abi. You can get it from Ekin Publishers. And, you know, and that book, you know, lots of youth have benefited, alhamdulillah. So, Habibi, may Allah bless you.
Thank you, brother.
Seni seviyorum abicim.
Ben de seni seviyorum abi.
Allah şükür.
Eyvallah. Selamun aleyküm.
Vallahi hadi bakalım.
Nasılsın?